Hey everyone, welcome back to this Kubernetes playlist of 0 to K8s Hero. In the last two videos, we have created pod and deployment, and we have seen how deployment is really useful, what are replicas, and how we can create multiple copies of our pod. But now that we have pod and deployments running, but how do users actually reach your app? So we can see our pods and deployments within the Kubernetes cluster using the commands or the CLI tool, but how does our user reach these pods or deployments and reach the services or microservices that's running within these pods? That's the job of the service. So let's break down the types and then expose our app. So a service gives a stable network identity to a set of pods. Pods come and go, as I told you. Pods can die, pods can crash, or you can delete the pod. So pods can come and go, and their IPs changes every time. But the service stays the same, and it load balances the traffic to healthy pods selected by a label. So we have different types of services. The default is cluster type, and then we have NodePort, then we have load balancer and external. So I think it's easier for you to see. So I'm going to create a service.yaml file, and we'll create a service really quick. Very first thing we have to mention is API version, which you all know by now is v1. Then we have kind, which is service. Then we have metadata, which is a dictionary, then name of our service, and we can say demo, nginx, and short for service SPC. Then we have labels, and I can say app, demo, nginx, SPC. Then we have specifications, so that's spec, and this is where we define the type. So I'm gonna do type NodePort. Now, why am I doing NodePort? I'll tell you in a bit. Selector, I can say app, demo, nginx. So I'm selecting my deployment here. Then we have ports, then name, HTTP, port 80, target port 80, and node port 30080. Now you must be saying what's going on and what are you exactly writing. So let's break down all these things in detail. So the very first thing is very obvious, API version, which is v1. So service is also part of core API group, so they are also within v1. Then obviously kind, the kind of the resource, in this case it's service, then few metadata, and then we have the specifications. So in specification, we have the type of service. So in this case, it's a node port, which means this service will be exposed on every node in the cluster on a static port between 3000, or not 3000 exactly, but 30,000 to 32767. 30,000 to 32767. So you can use any port between these numbers. So in our case, we are using 30,080 or 30080 basically. Then we have the selector, the most important part. The service uses this selector to know which pods it should send traffic to. Here, any pods with the label demo nginx will get traffic, and routing is done by the service. It is by default round robin. So this routing is done by service itself. Then we have ports definition. So port basically defines how traffic flows. So port 80, that's service or that service's internal port. Target port 80, that's a container port where traffic should actually go. Node port 30080, that's the external port on the node that maps traffic into the service. And name HTTP is just a label or protocol for this port. So once again, node port 30080 is the external port on the node that maps traffic into the service. Container port or the target port is the containers port where traffic should actually go, and port 80 is the service's internal port. Now here we are using the type node port, but we have other types as well. For example, ClusterIP. So that's a default type of service, and that's best for internal only. So it's best for microservices that needs to talk to each other and does not need public exposure at all. So you can use ClusterIP. Node port is when you need a public exposure, but on a small scale premises or good for local demos. Then we have load balancer, where you actually use the load balancer that's provided by AWS or Azure or any other major cloud provider. So this is basically a cloud way to get public IP. The cluster asks your cloud to create a load balancer, and that's how you use or expose your service. Okay, now that you have your service, it's time to create the service or apply the service. So I'm gonna copy this path. Oops. Copy path. Let's go to our Minikube. My Minikube is already running, so I'm gonna do, we can check our deployments or pods. So we can do kubectl get pods, then kubectl apply, or we can check the services also. So kubectl get services. So right now we have a default service that's created for accessing Kubernetes itself or interacting with Kubernetes itself. And you can see the type is ClusterIP. That means it's good for, or it's only managing the internal communications. So it does not have public exposure at all. There's another way to access services. You can use the short form as well. So instead of typing the whole services, you can just say SVC, and you can see the exact same thing. So let's apply our own service, kubectl hyphen apply. And as we know that this is not Linux friendly, let's change this and /mnt/c. Let's apply. So our service is created. So if I do kubectl get svc, now I have two services. So one is ClusterIP, which is by default. Another is NodePort. And you can see the port here. So 80 is basically a target port, and then you have your service port or the port within the node. Now, how to access this? So in Minikube, you can get the endpoint or the URL. So you can say Minikube Service, name of our service, so demo nginx svc hyphen URL. So this is your URL. If I click on this, or if I copy this, let's go here. So you can see default nginx page, which is very basic. So all it's saying is welcome to nginx. So that means our service works and we can access this using the service and the pod. So that's how our deployment or pod connects with the service, and that's how we can expose our services to the external world or to the outside world. Now, before ending this video, let's get to know some basic commands as well. So you've seen kubectl get pods, which shows you all the pods. you have seen kubectl get deployments, which shows you all the deployments. Now, let's say if you want to see the details about this deployment, what you can do is kubectl describe deployment, and then the name of the deployment. So all things, or all the things that's configured by Kubernetes, you can see by describing the resource. So you can see the namespace. As I said, don't worry about the namespace for now. You see the name, you see the creation timestamp, that when was it created, you see the label, annotations, replicas. So we have 5 desired, 5 updated, and 5 are available right now. So what's the strategy for update? So it's rolling update. Then we have rolling update strategy, how many pods or what percentage of pods can be unavailable or can be max unavailable. So these are strategies for updating your applications. And then we have the image, we have the port where this image is running, and all those things. Similarly, if let's say you get your service and you want to see or you want to see the details of your service, so you can say kubectl describe SVC and then the name of the SVC. So that's your service and its details. So here you can see all the events that's going on. Like in deployments, you can see that earlier we only had 2 replicas, but then I updated my deployment and replicas went to 5. So you can see all these events. So it's very good if you want to debug your applications or debug your deployments. You can see all the events here and easily debug if something went wrong. And that wraps up our service in Kubernetes. Now you know how to connect your users to pods using ClusterIP, NodePort, LoadBalancer, and more. So in the next video, we'll go one step further and look at ingress and what ingress is and how to route traffic into your cluster, manage multiple apps under the single domain and set up clean URLs for your service. So right now, the URLs that we are using are IPs or local hosts, how we can use the clean URLs for your service. So stay tuned for that and don't forget to subscribe to catch that lesson. And if you have any doubt, feel free to drop the comment. Once again, thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.